So make sure that you write down today's date. Today's day, it's Monday, the 25th. And we're doing section 2.4, solving absolute value equations. Now, in order to start this section, we need to know the definition of absolute value. So everybody write down this definition. The absolute value is the absolute distance from that value to zero. So let's say we wanted to walk from here to Hebert. How far is it? Let's say I wanted to walk from here to Hebert. There I am, right there. Okay. So how far is it from here to Hebert? It's actually 6.1 miles, right? 6 miles, right? Now, what if I wanted to walk from Hebert back here backwards? It's still going to be the same, right? So it doesn't matter which way you're facing, what direction you're going, right? It's still going to be the same distance. So when we talk about absolute value, we need to focus on the word distance, because distance is always positive. It doesn't matter if you're going in one direction or the other, it's always positive. So the absolute value of something is always going to be positive. Let's actually see the example on a number line. So here's a number line, and let's say I asked you, what's the absolute value of -3? What would you say the answer is?
3.
It's 3, that's right. Because if you're at -3 and you want to get to 0, after all, it says the absolute distance from that value to 0 is the definition of absolute value. So from here to 0 is actually 1 unit, 2 units, 3 units, right? So instead of me walking to Hebert, maybe I'm at the value -3. I go 1 unit, 2 units, 3 units. And it doesn't matter if you're going this way or backwards, right? You could be right here at 1, 2, 3. It doesn't matter. Distance is always positive. So the absolute value of -3 is +3. Same thing if it were the absolute value of +3. What's the answer to that?
3.
It's also 3, right? Because it's still 3 units away. 1, 2, 3. 3 units away to 0. So once again, absolute value is the absolute distance from that value to 0. So it's talking about the distance from whatever number you're talking about to 0. That's the absolute value. So what's the absolute value of -9?
9.
What's the absolute value of +9? 9. There you go. What's the absolute value of -1? What's the absolute value of +1? 1. What's the absolute value of 0?
0.
Absolute value of -0?
0.
Still 0, right? Okay. So anyways, we get the idea. You always get positive. Let's jot these next two down right here into your notebooks. 5 minus a -3 compared to 5 minus the absolute value of -3. See, a very common mistake I see when students simplify with absolute values is whenever they see a minus, what are you supposed to do? Plus, that's right. So I see students doing that, which is correct, so the answer is 8. But you're not supposed to do that down here. Absolute values really are like parentheses, but if you zoom into these parentheses, there's nothing to do in there. That's why you go to the minus, which changes to plus. This is also like parentheses, but you could actually do the absolute value of -3. What's the absolute value of -3? 3. So this guy right here is really 3, and I'm just going to bring down the rest, the 5 and the minus. So 5 minus the absolute value of 3 is really 5 minus 3, which is 2. So notice that the answers are different, right? So don't make the mistake of trying to change the minus to plus. That would be incorrect. Up here, yes, change to plus. Down here, no. Make sense? Okay, so we are going to have a little bit of simplifying. We're also going to have equations, solving absolute value equations. Let me start with the easiest type of absolute value equation. The absolute value of 3. Not the absolute value of 3, I'm sorry. The absolute value of x equals 3. Now, how do you get an answer to an equation? You know it's the answer when you find that value that works, that makes it a true statement. So what answer would this be? X equals what if it has to equal 3?
-3 or -3.
3 or -3, right? Or 3 and -3. So let me actually write that down. One answer could be x equals 3, and the other answer could be x equals -3. Why do we have two answers? Because there's two situations. There's a positive situation and there's a negative situation. So on all of our work, we're going to have to do the positive and the negative situation when it comes to absolute value equations. Okay, so we might as well understand the steps here or create the steps. How do you get from the original to the positive situation? Could somebody tell me what the difference is between this original one and this new one? What's the difference? There's no Go ahead, anything you want. Say it. Say it. Sticks, right? Whatever. Absolute value sticks or absolute value symbols. So right here, there's no absolute value symbols. Up here, there is. And that's exactly how we're going to write down our positive situation. So for the positive situation, you're going to write it without the sticks. Write it without the absolute value symbols. You're going to write it exactly the way it is without the absolute value sticks. Now, for the negative situation, what's the difference between this one and this one? It's also without the sticks, but there's a negative on your answer. So again, for the negative situation, you're also going to do it without the absolute values. These absolute values are gone. You erase them. They're not there anymore. But you take this number and you slap on a negative. You put a negative right on your answer. Okay? So that's how we're going to do the positive situation and the negative situation of any absolute value equation. The positive situation is writing it exactly the way it is without the sticks. The negative situation is the same thing, but you put a negative on your right side. Okay? Now this is obviously way too easy. Let's go for something a little more challenging. So everybody jot this one down. The absolute value of 2x minus 4 equals 12. Now, this one is more challenging. It's not as easy to think what number fits right here that'll give me 12. And even if you do find the number, you're not going to be able to. Let me change the color on the absolute values. It's kind of throwing me off. It looks like a 12. Yeah. Absolute value equals 12. Okay, so you're going to have to set up the positive and the negative situation. So go ahead, don't be afraid. Write it out. Pos, neg, put a little squiggly line right between the two. And once again, how do we do the positive situation? You guys just wrote it down in your notes. The positive situation, how do you write it? Without the sticks, without the absolute value sign, right? So let's write it exactly the way it is without the sticks. There it is. Now for the negative situation, it's going to be the same exact thing, but what? What changes on the negative situation? You make that a negative 12 instead of a positive 12. We just wrote that down, right? So the positive situation is writing it exactly the way it is. See how it is right here? Exactly the same without the absolute value sticks. That's why there is no absolute values right here. The negative situation is the same exact thing, but you change the 12 to a negative 12. I hope everybody's with me. And now we're going to solve both. Yes, we're going to do both. So that's kind of like two problems in one. For every one problem of absolute value, you're going to end up solving for two different equations. Let's solve for this first one. If I solve for the first one, I'm going to add 4 to both sides. And that'll become 2x equals 16, which means when I divide by 2, what do I get as a final answer? 8. Thank you very much. Okay, so x equals 8. That means that the other one's going to be negative 8, right? Wrong. Sorry. The other one's not going to be negative 8. You have to actually work it out. So don't get lazy and start saying, oh, if the positive one's 8, that means that the negative one's negative 8. That's incorrect. You actually have to work it out. Let me show you. Get rid of the 4 by doing plus 4. Plus 4. Rewrite your equation. New equation is going to be 2x equals negative 8. Final step will be to divide by 2. And divide by 2, you get x equals negative 4. And as you could tell, these are completely different answers. One's 8, one's negative 4. They're different. Okay? So this is what we're going to have to do on this entire section. So I just handed out these notes, and it might have a typo with regards to the steps. Now, don't freak out, all right? This is actually notes from my Algebra 2 class last year. But I want to give you these notes right now to solve any absolute value equation or inequality. Step 1 is to make sure that the absolute value is by itself on one side. So if you look at this example right here, the absolute value is on the left side of the inequality. It's not by itself. There's a plus 7, there's a minus 2. So obviously in this Algebra 2 problem, you would have to subtract 7, get a negative 10 on this side, rewrite everything else. And then you'd have to get rid of that minus 2 in front by dividing by negative 2 and dividing by negative 2. But see, that's Algebra 2. You guys don't have to freak out about that. Okay? Now, what do I mean by that? Step 1 of getting the absolute value by itself is going to be done for you. Okay? So you don't even have to worry about that. Step 1 is done for you. What you guys are doing is just step 2, where you set up your two situations, a positive situation and a negative situation. How do you do the positive situation? Write it exactly the way it is, without the sticks. That's what you guys said. the negative situation, and I always put a squiggly line right between the positive and the negative. The negative situation, you write it exactly the way it is without the sticks, but you flip the inequality symbol if it were inequalities. Today we just have equations, and change the sign of the right side, okay? So you add on that negative on the right side. So these notes, it's like way more than what you need. I'm not going to spend too much time on this because it's more Algebra 2. On today's section, all we're doing is skipping step 1 because it's already isolated for us, and we're doing step 2, which is setting up our two situations. Let's check out today's actual assignment. Okay guys, so here's our worksheet, and if you look at this first part of the worksheet, it's not even equations. You're not solving. All you're doing is plugging in and simplifying. I want to do one of these. Let's go with the hardest one, like number 4. So the first thing to do with number 4 is to identify your values that you're plugging in. You are plugging in A equals 2, B equals -3, and C equals -4. So I would rewrite it with those values in there. So again, as you can see, you simply plug in your values. I'm using 2 different colors so you can see it more clearly. The A value is 2, the B value is -3, and the C value is -4. So wherever you have a minus minus, you change the plus plus. Unless it's a minus minus out here, then you don't mess with that. You do the absolute value first. So we are able to change this minus minus to a plus plus. And let's work on the inside of the absolute value. That says 2 plus -3. What is 2 plus -3? -1, right? And we still have the plus 4 that we bring down. And what is the absolute value of -1? That's 1. So 1 plus 4 is 5. So that's super easy. And this is the hardest one there is, number 4 on the first 4. Expect to see a couple of these on the very first 2 or 3 questions on Friday's quiz. Okay? Now let's jump to what we were doing just a couple of moments ago, solving equations. So for example, let's look at number 5. I have an absolute value equation. I need to set up my positive situation and my negative situation. And I always do this. I label it pos, neg, I put a squiggly line down the middle. Now, once again, how do I write my positive situation? Anybody? Without the sticks, exactly the same, thank you. So we're going to have W plus 1 equals 5, exactly the same as what we see up here. Now the negative situation would be writing it exactly the same, the W plus 1, but instead of equaling 5, we're going to put? -5. Thank you, -5. So that's our positive situation, that's our negative situation. Now all we got to do is solve both. So if you look at the left, this one right here, let me zoom in. Let's solve that one. So how are we going to solve it? Well, you're going to subtract 1, W equals 4. So just because the positive situation is 4 doesn't mean that the negative situation is going to be -4. That would be incorrect. Do not do that. Over here on the negative situation, when we solve, we're going to have -1 to cancel out that positive 1, and it will be W equals what? There you go, -6. So there's our other answer. Now, I don't know why, but on this worksheet, they give you a number line. They want you to actually just put those answers down there. The +4 and the -6. Just to practice plotting points on a number line. So that's really about all there is to it. There is no simplification. You're never going to have to isolate. So like you're not going to have a 2 out here that you need to get rid of, or a -3 back here that you need to get rid of. It's always already going to be isolated. So all you have to worry about is doing a positive and negative situation. So for the positive situation, it would be what? That's right, n plus 2 equals 1. And for the negative situation? N plus 2 equals -1. I know you're probably thinking, that's it? This is so easy. It is. And we should all improve our grades with this coming Friday's quiz. So on the left, if I solve that, subtract 2, n will equal -1. That's an answer. And on the other one, subtract 2, n equals -3. So let's say you have some extra time on Friday's quiz. All you have to do if you have extra time would be to plug in your answers back in and see if it verifies to give you a true statement.